revenue turnover, second read. And we were able to get the PDF track changes in there for you guys, so let us know how you like that versus a Word draft. With
I think it works fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I had received the feedback on section 4, and the treasurer also had feedback. So I tried to take both the feedback from the board and the treasurer and try to work it into that sentence. I received feedback this afternoon that she was happy with that wording. Then she also had additionally requested an alteration under, I think it was section 5, subpart B. So I added in a new subpart B and everything got renumbered or relettered after that. Specifically clarifying how cash and non-cash turnovers would be treated.
Further comments or questions or recommended changes?
None at this time.
When I read through it this morning, I was satisfied with it.
Carried to next meeting.
Yep.
Sounds good. Next one, invoice payment, second read.
So I believe in this one, it was under section 5. There was the request to clarify that we will do EFT.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
In the in section 7, accounts office review of payables, in those bullets, it talks about org and account code, and the org is going to be, that's truncated word, correct? It's an
Section 7.
It's right above. It's the second or third from the bottom. Verification of funds, org and account code chain charge. Sorry.
I think it's verification of the fund, the organizational, and account codes.
Right.
All
So
three
what-
are codes.
What I'm saying is, it says org. It should say
You want it to be
organizational.
full organizational.
It shouldn't be a truncated word. That's an
I gotcha.
abbreviation that we all understand, but it shouldn't be in the policy.
Third to last bullet.
Why am I not seeing
7?
org in there? Oh, and now I see it. Third to the last bullet?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So update section 7. Okay.
That's the only one I had for that one.
No other concerns.
In 6, the second paragraph, there's a reference to majority must sign unless voted to approve one member. It's really unless voted differently, because school is 2, but not a majority right now, I believe, on something. So I think probably just a majority is required unless they have voted a different
Okay.
number of
Otherwise-
members who can sign or whatever. I can't think of a shorter word for that, but if you can.
Okay, I like that revision.
That's all I had on that one. Bring it back?
Carry
Yep.
to Next week.
Yep.
Okay.
Next one is encumbrances and accounts payable.
So this one I don't recall having any edits on.
I don't think we had any feedback on,
No, and
at the first read.
I reread it this afternoon before the meeting. I didn't have anything else or anything to change on it.
over here.
Same. Carry to the next meeting. And the last one for tonight, grants management, second read.
So this was just a few grammatical changes in section 4. And that was all I remember receiving for feedback.
Yeah. For section A, the comma.
Yep.
And I think you noted section 3 speaks to the various statute granted authorities outside of the voters granting the board authority at the annual,
Correct.
which is a adoption of a statute anyway, right? Technically.
Right. So I guess that only leaves the question, when I originally was drafting this, the intention was to clarify grants management, which can be much more technical. Those statutes talk about gifts as well. I don't know if you want to be inclusive of gifts in this policy, or you'd rather just address gifts in a separate policy and just have a similar section 3 referenced in that policy as well. Gifts can be tangible assets, can be real estate. So there's probably different topics that gifts really get into.
I was going to say there's, I'm assuming there's substantially different topics and different requirements around gifts, or not requirements, but application than what we have in the grants policy. Like it's not just one more
Right.
section or subsection or paragraph.
Right.
It's going to be a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Do a standalone.
I think so.
Okay.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Any other comments on that one?
No. Go through them another time for our third and final.
Yep, we'll carry it for next meeting. Brian, a minute. I didn't see it in these, and there might be another one, and I just didn't go back through all the ones we have. Do we have like a vendor, like an approval policy or setup policy for vendors? Like, just thinking about like some of the things that are addressed here and fraud and other things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know where I am, there's a form, you put it in, a different party has to do a validation, you know, there's all of those checks and balances to ensure there's some segregation of duties and some validation of the vendor is not your cousin
We currently do not have
creating
any policy
invoices
to
for
guide that.
just because, you know? Okay, might be something to ask about.
I guess,
And just having a set list of approved vendors, and if you want to add to it, then obviously there's the state vendors, which is a little bit different. You know, if they're part of a state contract already, just ensuring that that data matches what's on there, then there's a level of confidence in the validity of it. But when we're just procuring and end up with a vendor, okay. I think about it. I'm not sure we have to have it, but
I've worked in places where it is locked down, like you're talking about, in the sense that there's a division of duties. One person can request that a vendor be accepted and authorized, but that has to go through a review and approval process. And then once it's available to you, then you can use the vendor going forward. We currently don't have that practice in place, so that's something I can review with the financial team and just talk about the logistics of how we could roll that out.
And even, I think approved list and approvals is good, but I think the separation of duty validation of the remit addresses and where you're sending money, that's the piece that is the more, just from a fraud standpoint.
Right.
And knowing that that just continues to be more and more out there.
Yep.
Get their thoughts on it. Please.
I will work on that. We have 2 other topics that came up last week that will also be subject of probably a policy recommendation for the 3 of you to consider. So I can research those, research this, and bring those to you in the near future.
And the gifts one is now on the docket too, at some point.
Yeah. Jake, are you thinking that would be a section within the invoice payment process? Because that's generally how we're going to deal with the vendors.
It could be, or it could be just a separate one that just talks to it. I don't have a preference. That's what made me think of it as I went back through it another time and just looking at, there was a little bit addressing if something seemed odd in the during the process, but getting there, establishing the vendor setup was the only piece.
Okay.
Or validating changes. Oh, they've changed their address you're paying to.
Yeah, remittance changes come in.
Right.
How do you handle those? Yep.
The remit is
Okay.
now Jacob Smith, 14 High Street. You know, you want to validate that that's really valid.
Okay.
And I would say either way, if that's something the team thinks makes sense and to put it in that policy, then we can adopt it and amend later, or we can wait and review changes if they, whichever way the group wants to go.
Okay.
Good on financial management policy drafts?
Yes.
Yes.
Meeting minutes of September 6th, 2023.
I had a chance to read them tonight. Did the both of you?
You did or did
I
not?
did.
You did? Yes, I did
Okay.
have a chance to. Did you, sir?
Very quick, high level.
We can bring them back, or if you're comfortable with what you saw. Scott, were you?
Yeah, I'm fine with them.
We can move forward on them.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve meeting minutes from Wednesday, September 6th, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sixth water commitment for fiscal '24.
I believe that was $40.
Correct.
Charges.
Yeah. Make a motion to approve the 6 water commitment for final charges at 48 River Road in the amount of $40.00.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We could start a look at the special town warrant and then come back and finalize it after, if that makes
Sure.
sense. We got
Sure.
a few
I
more
was
minutes
just going to
before
ask
the
how you
joint.
wanted to proceed.
Yeah, I mean, we could take a short recess, or we could look through that. The substance really beyond the numbers for us. The number will be just if there's any changes in the group discussion before we adopt it. Special town election warrant,
Election.
please. Should, in question one, should July 1st, should that be a number? Everywhere else it's numeric. I don't have a preference, I just don't recall.
It came that way from the recommended language from Mass Department of Revenue,
Okay,
but I wondered the same thing. I don't know if there's a preference for numerals or to have it written out.
Usually if it's written out, you see like July, the 1st of July in the year 2020, yeah.
It should be consistent one way or the other.
Yeah.
well, and down below we say 7, parentheses, number 7. So,
Would you like me?
it's consistently inconsistent historically, so it just caught my attention in this one because we're drafting it. There's nothing inaccurate about first,
I can change it to a numeral.
I don't have a preference.
I would like to see July 1.
Okay, I'm fine with changing it because that looks weird to me, and I stumble there, like, what?
I'll make that revision.
Sounds good. So we'll just,
Yeah, I don't have any other concerns.
yeah, I don't either. We'll just make sure we don't change the number, and then we'll
Yeah.
not forget to come back and adopt that before
Yes.
we move to executive later. We'll take a 5-minute recess.
Fine with me.
Move we recess at 6:54 and resume at 7 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. We'll be back momentarily.
slight change, and I'm sure she can explain what changed.
Welcome back, everyone. 7:03 PM. We'll call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee to order. So FY24 financial review and review of the special town meeting warrant. It's really just kind of hand in hand. So that's where we are from last meeting. We have updated override sheets, which I think everybody has, an even more recent copy than was emailed out of the estimated override impact and overall tax. Just circling back to the whole tally of numbers and how we got there, there was the open question about diesel fuel and that pricing. Superintendent Sanders was able to come up with some of that data. So based on our contracted vendor for the full trailer load of diesel, the current price, including delivery, the delivery fee is around $3.54, 55 cents rounded, somewhere in that right now. Obviously that can fluctuate. And adding the Caro additive adds another, is that included? Hang on. The Caro is $4.02 a gallon. So all in estimated for the year for delivery for that was around 29.5, so just under 30,000. And then he had 2,000 for propane fill-ups for the generators, puts about 32. And from what he said, we had 22 in the budget. We added 12 in the override numbers, bring it up to 34. Current pricing is 32, all in, so there's a little buffer there, and the price will probably fluctuate. By the time we actually buy it, I don't know how far, but hopefully not too far. Does that help everybody with that one at least get there? Other than that, any other items from the tally, anything that has come up or questions or comments on if we've sat on it for a week or a short week? Okay. So the override impact sheets that the principal assessor got us. Any questions on any of that? On the data? And what's there?
Jackie, what would the...
I didn't expect any questions.
I was just
Thank you,
curious as
Jackie.
to what the tax rate would be without the override.
So currently, the tax rate for residential and open space is $8, so it would be $8.21 using last year's values, not this year's values. And for the CIP, it was an additional 33 cents on the tax rate, which I think is $13.14, I think, or something right around there. I don't quite have that. That one's not as easy to remember. And I have a lot of numbers floating in my head right now.
That's fine. Thank you.
Dan?
Jake, I'd just like to make a comment. There's a lot of information on this sheet. It's my belief anybody who wants to study it can learn a lot from it, and that's great. I want to give people all the information you possibly can. On the other hand, if this is expressed in a way that I can understand it, I figure everybody else will too. So, to me, this $142 for a $100,000 house is how much it would increase the total tax somebody pays, or add $142. So, it's pretty easy for people to see, if they have a $200,000 house, they double it, or a $300,000 house, they triple it. And that, for me, that's like the main thing. How much extra am I gonna have to pay if I vote for this? $142 per 100,000. You can read all this other stuff and charts and graphs and percentages if they want to, and that's fine. But it all boils down to that, and that's the residential. I'm not mentioning the CIP, that's a separate thing, but just for the average homeowner, homeowners are gonna be the ones that come to vote. You know, a couple of business owners, but not many. But it's gonna be mostly homeowners that you want to vote in favor of what you're proposing. And so that's the major group of people. And if they understand $142 per 100,000, you know, that pretty much, to me, that answers most of the questions they have. Now, what it's for, that's a whole different thing. All these different things, do they want to support this, that, or the other, but that's a different issue. This is strictly for this sheet I was talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, I think part of the discussion tonight is, and will be ongoing, is how are we going to present this in the informational session that's as clear and concise and accurate estimates, because again, that's based on last year's values. That can change, or will change probably, so the 142 is close, and what your house was last year is not going to be exactly the same, so they're all rough numbers, right? But I think that's really what we also need to talk about, is how do we convey the information, and how do we convey the impacts, both of what this does for us, which I think we will capture some in the STM and such, just by nature of how we do it, and also what are the impacts of not doing this over time, right? Right, this year may not be as noticeable, but that's not going to, it's going to continue to become more apparent every year, right, if we don't have any more capacity as we go forward.
I absolutely agree. I've seen a couple other charts and the Norwood example and a variety of things, and for those people who want the details, you give them whatever they want, that's fine, just my opinion. But again, for the average person, if I can understand it, they can understand it, 150 or so dollars per 100,000, I think it answers most of the questions. Again, what's in the town meeting, if they want it or they don't, that's a different issue, but this financially is the simplest, easiest way to explain it, I think. So, present it how you choose.
Jackie did provide a more basic chart.
Based off of the
Yeah,
Norway example.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry that the columns aren't perfectly lined up. This is not my
That's
area of
the
expertise.
least of our worries.
It was an example, we can help polish it, if that's
Yeah.
what we want to
Yeah.
do. And plaster draft an estimate all over it. And
Yeah.
did you see that one as well, Dan?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
Part of the reason that I say easy to understand, again, we don't have stupid people. They can understand whatever they want to take the time to understand, and that's fine. People are intelligent. However, if people are confused, they tend to vote no. They're not quite sure, they're more apt to vote no than yes. So, well, I don't know, but I'll vote yes anyways. So the easier it's explained, just my opinion, the easier it's explained, the better off we're going to be, I think. But I had to see the Norwood paper, yes.
Just to clarify, the example, the Norwood layout with our numbers, that one you saw?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Jackie just held
The
up.
one
I've
that was
seen
in
it.
that, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
He had an assessors meeting before this meeting.
Got it. I would count on you to understand it better than we do. I was almost going to say it, but
So Jackie, those numbers so if we're talking about what we're going to present as far as like
I mean, it's all
package,
part of it.
It's
yeah.
all part of it. I like doing a simplified version. I agree with your point, Dan, that, too much information. I mean, I could even look at the override impact with the normal sheets that we look at with the yellow and the blue, and even I can, where does that information, what does that mean again? And I've been doing it for several years. So the other format I think works, but I am curious about the numbers, because if we're talking $142, right, it's 142 per 100,000.
So in the email that I sent you, I said I only used the override increase for
Right.
the example based on the city or town of Norwood. And one of my questions was, did you want everything? So if you look at, that's why there's the current tax rate, the levy percentages, and then the new amounts raised, and the tax rate for the override amount, and then the tax rate for the impact no override. That's where the 21 cents and the 121 comes in, and that makes the 142. But the top number, that was the current levy plus just the increase. I wasn't sure exactly what you wanted. Norwood, it appeared that Norwood only used what they were going to raise for an override. They didn't use what was already going to be included in their tax increase. So I just stuck with the basic facts. I hope I did my math right.
I think at least my thought in reading through that is, I think taxpayers are going to want to know what is the total rate. Like, they want to know what the change is, what the change of what we're asking for in the override is, but they're going to want to know the whole picture, right? And I think having current year, I would almost recommend maybe right after that we do, FY24 annual town meeting, tax, increase or levy change, impact, and we can show the 21 cents so people can know, okay, it was estimate around 821, and now we want to do this. But kind of we're already there. That's already been approved, and then from there can show, the impact of the override.
Right, I wasn't sure how you wanted it
Yeah.
presented, so,
I'm
Yeah.
brainstorming.
I was thinking something similar to that, if nothing changes, here's what the rate's going to be, here's what the rate would be if you add in, there's the total. And I wouldn't use every $25,000 all the way up through 2 million. I would just do, similar to what Dan was talking about, do one for $100,000 and then maybe one for 200. And then after that, people can figure out, well, if I have a $400,000 home, or maybe every 100,000. I mean,
the only reason I did the all the way up to 2 million is, Norwood did, but also I have heard from people that the impact, and then you say it's so much per 100,000, and they're like, well, what does that mean for my $357,000 home value? It's like, they're very
3.5.
capable of doing it, but they don't want to. They want an easy answer. They want to look at the chart and say, okay, my home is worth $375,000, that means an increase of this. I tried to, actually, the wide range is, we might not have any homes around the 900,000 mark, but we do have homes that are between as high as 700 and 800,000. So it was kind of a range of the, and I started out with the average. But whatever the board and the finance committee want is how I can structure it.
So I'm going to say the exact opposite. I like the chart and I like having that information there. My concern with having people do their own math is if they have an error or they say, oh, it's this, or they don't understand quite how the formula works, then they come up with a different number than us. My only thought is, I know we have houses that are probably valued at less than 238, so I'd like to see it start at maybe 150.
We do have a few. I have to be honest, there's not many anymore.
Okay.
But there is a few. So I could do the range of where the low end is up to the
Yeah,
the
whatever
basic
you
high
find is
end,
the
which,
lowest.
so I could do lower. 150 is probably on the low range
Okay.
of what the assessments are.
So maybe just the 150, 175
Yeah.
to
250.
238 and
I
then
was
250.
just throwing out, like, there's
Sure.
no rhyme or reason to them. I'm like, okay, well, I know there were some houses valued at 450. I know there's some houses valued at 635, and so that's where I was going.
At some
with that.
point, we start jumping up,
Yes.
makes sense, I think, more than 25.
If you're gonna put all of those in $25,000 increments, you don't have to put the 238. It's a
Okay.
meaningless one.
So I can start with the 150. I also felt that we do have some commercial property owners that are in the $1 to $2 million range. And I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that they understood the impact of that as well.
I would say if you notice something when you're doing this, like if you know that there's a real outlier, that there's a business that's a $6 million business, I don't see any reason why you don't throw on just that assessed value 6 million, and you don't have to do the whole range, but just that particular area.
I can group, it's a report I can run that's an order of value that pretty much starts at the bottom and goes to the top, and I can pick and choose where the groupings are
Okay.
of most of them.
Yeah, I think even jumping around based on
Yes.
what we really
Yeah.
have, you don't need that in between if we don't have
Right, I'll just do the-
anyone very close to it, it probably
Right.
doesn't add
the-
anything.
The groupings that are the most of the averages, and then that will help.
The one thing it doesn't talk to, and I don't know that it's noise, but it's also a question that we'll probably get is, but that's only the override, what's the total tax gonna be? And so,
Yeah.
So
we'll
with
just need to be prepared for that. I don't know that we can visualize that, at least in a separate sheet. I don't think it can be on the same sheet without starting to get really confusing. But,
Well, I was gonna say, instead of having 3 columns, if you use the same setup, but you just have multiple columns, and you say, what is your current impact, what you were talking about, and then you can show what the anticipated estimate of FY24 is, which is the 821, and what the dollar amounts are, actually fill them in. That shows it without any override, what we can anticipate, and obviously there's an asterisk with a caveat about home values and assessed values changing. But your next line item can be, you can have an anticipated without the override and anticipated with the override, and then you can duplicate that for the CIP.
So I could have, the way I understand it would be 4 columns almost, well, actually, it would be
Yeah.
It would be 5 columns. You start out with what, the values of what the housing, the values are, and then the impact with what we've currently spent, raised and appropriated, and then the impact with the override. So it could be across the board, and I could put headings on it that said.
Yeah, and then, so it shows them what they can expect if nothing, if no override goes through. This is the anticipated FY24. This is the anticipated FY24 if we approve it. And here's all the ranges from 150 to 2 million, however we break those down.
Right.
And then do the same thing for CIP.
do you want to see the only, or you just want to see the total?
The totals, the 2 totals.
So total at current estimated tax rate, and then the totals including the
showing
override?
Total without, total with, and people can look at what the difference is. If you want to get really crazy, you can put a third column
Well,
for,
I'm just
and then you
asking.
show the difference. Now, I think looking at total,
So I'm envisioning assessed values, which is what you would base the formula on as you go across, and what the tax rate estimate is going to be without the override, with the override, and do the same thing for the CIP. So you'd
Yes.
have, it's a total of 5.
Yeah.
And then they can compare the 2.
right.
I guess my question is, did you want the information that was up on the top, which is what Norwood used? I thought it was a little confusing myself, but
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I think most people are going to be asking about, what is my bill going to look like?
I'm not sure this format, and, it's the whole thing's kind of black and white, so that's part of it, right? It's just
Right.
kind of blocky, but not a criticism, but I'm thinking in the top part, maybe a different way of visualizing that, but I do think it's good for people to understand what that shift is, what that impact is, because it comes up every time, like how much of it's falling to commercial, industrial, personal property, and how much isn't, right? And so,
so you like
I like the top that at least talks to that, only less than estimated 10.5% of the override burden is gonna fall on residential open space versus commercial, industrial, personal property.
So,
And I think the number, I think just in general, somewhere, we should be making it clear what the change is, right?
So the levy percentages and then the new amounts raised based off of those percentages, the allocation percentages, with the 65% MRF. So, all right, when do you need this by?
Tomorrow.
No.
No, no.
October 2nd is your next meeting?
The informational session is, well, yeah,
The
we'll need it
11th?
before,
October
we'll need it by the end of review, but
Well, I guess the question is, are we trying to include these documents in a mail home packet? Because that, I would think, would change the deadline as to when we need them by.
If you are gonna review it on the 2nd, our office needs it by the 26th, so we can put your packet together.
And I'm in
Okay.
Boston all next week. Although I should be able to do some of the work remotely.
well, and as long as we know the formulas, we can do it and ask you just to vet it, that we
that-
didn't do our math wrong, format-wise, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be you doing it. I appreciate it, but
Well,
I know you're busy. I know.
I'm not the only one. So I could,
I don't know.
I will have opportunities next week to work on it during the day,
Okay.
so.
I don't know what everybody else thinks about the top part. I'm not saying it's really easy to follow right now, but I think some of what's in there is good information.
My fear is, I get what Dan is saying about having something that's simple, but I feel like every time we simplify too much, that's when we get asked about that information. And this isn't the type of meeting, I feel like, where we can go, we'll get back to you on that, we'll get you that like, we've gotta have these answers on the fly. And so I think having that information, I think it should be there. I think people are gonna ask for it, I think they're gonna want it, and I think
So-
those who want it are gonna want it there, and those who don't are just gonna skim right over it and move on.
So what information do you, from the Excel spreadsheet one or the Word document one? The nice pretty colored one or the plain one?
I like the plain one just because I think it's easy to read, and I think you could make it pretty.
Yep.
But I think that spells it out very clearly.
Yeah.
And
And the information on the top,
Yes.
okay.
Is the information on the top, like the left-hand column, be adjusted a little bit?
Yes, the columns don't match up.
Okay, so they match up, that's good.
Yeah, I already apologize for the layout.
And whether the top is there or not, if for some reason it's not, somewhere else, it'd be good to spell out that RO means residential and open space, because that does clear it up top.
I could, I mean, when I'm doing the columns, like what you asked for, the 5 columns, we could put it on top of those columns that explain it's residential and open space, and they carry 10.41% of the burden, and over in the CIP, which is commercial, industrial, and personal property, they carry 89.59% of the burden. I mean, I could put it all up, just in one big sheet with the columns and that information up on the top. So that it's,
that might make,
yeah.
I'm visualizing what you're saying, and I think it makes sense because you can header the residential open space.
Yes.
It's 2 columns of data.
Right.
Here's your proposed tax rate, here's your
Right.
other proposed, and kind of go
And I
down from
can
there.
insert the information in that particular header, and then it'll work.
I think the only thing that wouldn't carry, assuming we're showing total impacts, is it won't show the individual shift of just the override portion. But I think as long as we have that number, I don't think that's important, do you?
Well,
Like instead, we'd show a shift of the 14.2 million and the 12.3, because your columns would be the full tax rate, they wouldn't be the difference, because we only have the totals in the planned columns.
right, but the allocation of the values wouldn't change any, it doesn't change the allocation of value doesn't change whatever the number is. It's the burdens on the taxpayers. What's the burden that the residential and open space is carrying, and what's the burden the CIP is carrying? They're going to stay the same. Is that what you were trying to get at that you wanted in the headers as well, or no? I know Dan had wanted that you had mentioned the allocation, the burden that would fall on the residential and open space and the burden that would fall on the CIP. You would want that information in there. So I'm just wondering if that's where, that is part of the information up on the top there.
I think the percentages we'd want, right,
Yes.
which are double column headers.
Right.
What I was getting at is the impact of the override, the 293 and change.
Oh, okay.
293,000 and
Yes,
change on the
yeah.
1.537 million and change.
Yes, that does change.
Split, if we're showing 821 and 942, then it's going to show the split of our normal already raise and appropriate 12.3 and change million and the split on 14.2. It's not going to show just the split of the override, which I think
Yes.
is, I don't have a problem with it, but that won't be there if we do it that way.
Right.
We either could carry it somewhere else, or at least we have that data to speak to it. I don't know if it's important.
I don't know if, yes, I think it would muddy it a little bit more. Already lots of figures on a page, lots of numbers.
I generally like the idea of it in the top of the table. It just feels clean, like if it's kind of the headers of what we're, and then people just, the rest of this sheet is just find my spot.
Yes, find my spot. What's it gonna cost me? All right, I will work on this on Thursday. I'm off tomorrow. And then I will get it to you as early as possible, and then, do you meet on Monday? Monday night?
Second, but
The
we need
second.
it by the 26th.
You need it by the 26th. Okay, that won't be a problem.
Is there other data?
Yep.
We're gonna just show the total, so we're gonna drop the individual impacts of the current tax rate and the new one. Anything else you want on this that isn't there?
I think that the percentage increase from the previous year should be on there, since we usually are asked what the percentage increase is. And it looks like, at least from my calculation, with the override, it's 17.75% from
Okay,
last year.
Yeah, I didn't do that math, so you're probably right.
Yeah, but, at least on here, I don't have last year's levy, so I couldn't figure that.
At least that was the increase of the tax rate. So, but that was, I just did that for residential though, I didn't do it for commercial, so.
All right, I will give it my best shot on Thursday.
Thank you.
I just had one comment before we move on. And I think it's a valid way of looking at it, just, I may express things differently than some people. Looking at these numbers, 293,000 that the homeowners and open space split, and the $1.5 million that's commercial split. If someone came up to you and said, I want to sell you a house that's worth $1,800,000, and all you gotta pay me is 293,000, you'd probably say, how many houses you have for sale? So, it's another way of looking at it.
And while I agree with you that the majority of the voters that could be there will be residential, our commercial property owners are affected too, so not to leave them out. Yeah, I got the same number as you, 17% and change. So that's a direction for that document. That's one document. Any questions on the data, the rest of it? Good with what we have? Any other items in terms of what we want to have or start drafting to present for information, either to send out as an informational with the STM, or to have ready for the meeting, or to have ourselves to speak to?
So Mariah's done it a few times when planning has had stuff come up. We've kind of sent a mailer postcard ahead of time. And I don't know if we're not gonna be able to have time to send everything home ahead of the informational session, if we could do something like that, like just a one sheet, please come out, here's the date, time, where it's gonna be held, and maybe a link. I know in the time when we've had documents online, she's just put the web address and go here to check, to check stuff out. So I don't know if maybe doing something like that's more feasible than trying to get all this together to mail home to everybody before the informational session.
Well, generally, we mail the STM copy of it in full to everybody, so we could have it in there. I don't think there's any reason we couldn't have a page that says the informational session, for, for questions and answers and more, thorough discussion of this. Anything you have ahead of the STM will be held at this date. We can create a link ahead of time that, information as we put it together will be here and presented at the meeting. And we don't have to include all of it in the packet, in what gets mailed, but then it's gone out with that notice if you think together is okay, all together. We can send a separate postcard, but it'll probably go out the same day, roughly. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there'll be much time in between for a postcard to get out before
I
the
don't think
meeting
so.
versus the STM in the mailbox, but
What's the expense of the two different mailings?
About
It's
$137,
$143.95.
under 150 for each.
they're the same rate for a postcard and the whole STM.
There's
a bulk rate?
Actually, it's a little bit more, I think. Every door direct is what we use for the mailers, and that goes out 19 cents, I think.
Yeah, that's the $143.
And postcards are more.
Postcards cost more. Okay.
You can't use the every door direct process for postcards.
Unless I'm going to print a full 8x11 sheet and mail that home to everybody. On cardstock.
If we think that a postcard is going to get people's attention differently, and maybe that's where you were going, like we could send both in for $150. I mean, it's not a bad expense if we think there's value in it. I don't know.
I was just thinking, could a postcard go out like end of this week, like real soon? Or before our next meeting?
Sure. Well, see, I say sure. I don't actually have to do a lot of work with that, so. I
Depends on
don't,
how quickly we can get a file to the printer, have it returned back to us. It's got to be on cardstock. It has to meet USPS standards. So
what's their average turnaround normally?
4 to 5 days. So if they had it by Wednesday, we could have it beginning of next week, I would assume.
So I guess, yes, it could go out probably a week before, week
About a
plus
week
before the
earlier.
STM goes out. I'm seeing nods generally, so I'm thinking yes, that's a worthy cost to try to put that out sooner. Just put the message out.
I think, I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous. We're talking about a $2 million override and we have no audience, so I mean, I would like to get the word out to the residents as soon as we could to let them know that, hey, there's gonna be this, a special town meeting and an information session, so please come and, voice your concerns and ask your questions or make your comments, or, I don't wanna go into this with the residents feeling like they did not have an opportunity to be heard.
And we spoke a few meetings back about wanting to, make sure the message that is being circulated is coming from factual numbers and data and not that sort of underground message that may be driven by emotions, fear. We're going to be driven out of the town because we can no longer afford to,
Incomplete data and things like that.
things like that. So I think the sooner we can get in front of it and say, this is coming, keep an eye out, and then follow it up with more data, and say, please read, digest, and look forward to seeing you at the informational session where we can answer any questions you have.
So high level, what do we want on a link? So we'll create a link and we can create a placeholder on the website, even if it doesn't have data yet that we've completed.
I think like a basic save the date format, date, time, location, You know, as documents become available, they'll be posted at such and such, you know, on the town website, here you go. I feel like that could be sufficient. I mean, I'm thinking like a real basic, like, save the date announcement. It's coming, here's the date, please join us.
Informational session about a 1.8 million
Yeah, yeah.
override, because,
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
Yep.
I know Mariah's done it before, I'm sure we have a general format, but we can ask her for help if we don't, or if she has it to put it together. Does someone want to take the responsibility of approving the draft message? I'll take volunteers anywhere. The tables.
Here's my brainchild, will do it.
All right. Are you all good with that? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Yep.
So we'll get that drafted, approved, printed, mailed. As reasonably quick as possible. We can put a similar or same, splash page on the STM mailing too if we want. Just talking to that, because that should get there before the informational session as well. To people, this is another reminder. Okay. Other things things that we are looking for the informational session to have.
The date will be full for the informational center.
They're Wednesdays, Mr.
I believe it's October 11th.
October 11th?
Yeah. October 11th for the informational session. The next joint meeting will be October 2nd for us. The STM is October 18th, and the special election is October 23rd. Yes?
I haven't put the around town together yet. It will be out the first week of October. So if you want to insert, kind of save the date, I mean, it's, whether or not they read it and they still do the postcards, at least we made due diligence to make sure that people are aware.
Yeah, I think on the postcard it's probably noisy to have all the different dates. Maybe it's not, but in the around town we could do that for sure. Informational session, special election. Absolutely.
Thursday, Brian, not Friday, Thursday.
I sent 3 documents to
You
them.
did, thank you.
Back to the postcard, do we want just the informational session date for that postcard, or do we want to list all 3 things coming up?
We've got the informational session, STM, and
STE or special election?
special election. I personally would say I would leave that up to whomever's actually doing the design. If they feel they can fit all 3 dates on there, that's great. And if not, maybe at least the informational obviously the informational session, but, I know when the election is, you have to come to the informational session.
Yeah, we might be able to embed it in there too, just in like informational session on, and that's the big point, related to the special town meeting on and the special election on. It's kind of the context. Okay. Impacts conversation, I mean, what kind of data are we trying to put together for that? I know we didn't necessarily get as much as we might have wanted so far on what the impact of no override is, longer term, short and long term. Short term is a little easier because it's just what was cut to get to the budget we have, but
I'm hesitant to put together a document that says all of the things that could be impacted if we haven't actually sat down and gotten that information from the department heads and looking at what the FY '25 budget really looks like with no override. I mean, we can speculate. We have general numbers. We have a general idea of things that will not be able to be funded based on the current funding sources that were used and the 2.5% levy increase, but it's all speculative until we actually do that due diligence. And I'm hesitant to throw out be careful if you don't vote for this because this is what it's going to look like without actually having done that work. I've seen other people use that methodology and I don't like it. So I just think it's, if we haven't done our due diligence, we can talk about what we know. We can talk about the deficit in total dollar amounts of what we might be looking at and funding sources that are not viable, such as, we use things like free cash to fund operating budget. There was things in there. Those aren't going to be available. So we know what we could be short, but we don't know what those impacts will be. It's hard to say, because I'm looking back to like the thing of Norwood. They knew what they were going to cut. They already did that homework before, and they knew all the things that were going to happen, and they could very legitimately say, if this doesn't go through, it's not forewarning, it's just a forewarning. These are the things that we cannot continue to do. But we haven't done that work. And I think that's a lot to ask us to try and come up with in the next 5 days.
5 days.
I may be off base, but I don't think I'm too far out in left field. If people like the services that they're getting, whether it's plow the streets, police, response, fire, whatever it is, if they like the services they're getting, then this will maintain that, and it'll help us out in the future. Trying to point out, as you say, well, you won't get this, you won't get that, people start thinking you're trying to scare us into voting. We're not trying to do that at all.
Right.
It's just a very positive thing of, if you like what you've been getting and you want to keep getting it, you like the trash picked up, and you like the lights on and that kind of stuff, this will do it for you. It's a very, to me, very positive approach.
Yeah. And that's the mock draft memo that I had put together based on Norwood's. It was basically that saying, we in Erving have come to understand a certain level of service. In order to maintain that and enhance that, this is the override that we're proposing. That's the stance I like. I think you could have a blanket statement that says, without one, there clearly will be budget deficits that we'll have to address, but we don't know what those impacts will be until we have the opportunity to get there.
I mean, I agree. I'm all for, the point of this is to maintain and positively forward, right?
Right.
It started because we cut things, but it didn't start from because we're going to lose all of these things tomorrow if we don't do this. But the idea that there are impacts to it long term. I just want to be prepared that that question's probably going to get asked. If that's the answer, I don't have a problem supporting it, saying it also. I agree. We don't necessarily know exactly where each one is. That'll be decisions we have to make at those times as we balance those budgets in those years, but it's just a little vague. And if we're okay with that, then fine. I also agree we aren't going to put together something super concrete and vetted in
Right.
the short time we have left. That part of the request didn't come generally from most of the departments.
I'd like to paraphrase one of the things that I saw on the Erving website. I don't know which group of Erving people it was. I think it was maybe 1972-ish or so, that Proposition 2.5 went in. It was about 50 years ago. And this person put on the website, how do they expect us to stay within 2.5%? Look at the price of food and fuel and everything else. Well, over long term, I think it's a good thing that government is restrained. They don't just go hog wild and spend everything under the sun. Another way of understanding why do we need something more than usual is everybody understands. The grocery bill went up, the food bill went up, how much people get paid, everything's gone up. And yeah, we basically want to maintain the spirit of that Prop 2.5. We don't want to just spend everything on everything we might want. But it's a valid point this person raised, who was not 50 years old, wasn't here when it started, that when things go up drastically more than 2.5% and your new growth, what are you going to do? You know, it's a valid point. Somebody's going to stand up and say, Prop 2.5, that's all you can do. Well, you can do that, but then you're going to have some reduction of services when everything's gone up 15, 20, 30%.
I was reflecting on this the other day, and I thought of you and conversations about the cost of milk in the last year plus, you know, as we've talked about wages and we've talked about budget and all of that and how much inflation was and impacted everybody. And it's just coming to that of it's just finally hit the town expenses, right? And so that's part of this too. It's just that all those expenses have caught up with the town budget now. Everyone else has already felt it in their pocketbook, unfortunately.
I'm very hopeful and optimistic that people are looking at this. There's always going to be a couple people say, no, I don't give you another nickel for anything. They can do that. It's a free country. But we're all in this together. The people watching, every taxpayer, we're working together on this, trying to. It's never us against them. We're trying to work together so that everybody gets what they want. It's their money. So.
You know, one possible benefit of not having fixed numbers going ahead if this doesn't pass is, you know, if people are willing to have a reduction in service, what are the services then the people will want? And it would give them the opportunity to voice that rather than just having it sit with this forum. You know, maybe some people don't want a additional full-time firefighter. Maybe some people will be satisfied with shutting the streetlights off at an earlier time. Maybe other people would, you know, not mind if the roads weren't treated as well. I don't know, but if they come out en masse to say, no, we don't want to pay, then it's like, okay, well, let's get together and decide where we're going to cut, rather than, as someone said a few minutes ago, it's a scare tactic that you're going to lose this stuff.
Probably be what the FY25 budget conversations are then, if that's where we are, of what do people want to change if we can't afford them all. So I don't want to belabor it, but I also don't. I want to make sure we have what we need prepared, and we don't have a lot of time till that meeting. So, is there other data we don't have? I know we have lots of numbers, and we have the spreadsheet, and we can send the one that I had, or whatever one that has the notes by department, and you know, kind of. I have some general drivers. I think we've all taken some notes along the way. We can try to summarize those in a list. That's, you know, here it is, and here's what that's made up of, generally, to get to that number, just averages. And, you know, what services or change in service that does. Is there other things that anybody wants to have that we don't already?
Doesn't go through at all. We're going to have that talk regardless. But how long would it be for another potential override talk? Because if the voters vote it down, we're going to have a talk about what's going to get cut no matter what. And if that has to happen, at that point, people could then decide, well, do we want to try another override to refund what is going to get cut or not? Because right now, we have the list of what we want back, which is pretty clear, in my opinion. And that's what we hope happens, obviously. So regardless, if it passes, great. If it doesn't, we're having that talk no matter what.
I think the reality of what that means will be more apparent when we go in the FY25 budget process,
Right.
which is technically starting by the time we're doing the informational session, at least historically.
Yep.
Yikes. But, winter through early spring as we're doing the FY25 process, I think that's where the impact's going to lie. Because we've already decided where the impacts are for the current fiscal year if it doesn't go through. Because we've already set that budget. And
Right, but I guess I'm
asking, like,
do we have to wait a year from?
I was going to say, I don't think there's any regulatory. I think it's just, we
Because if
got to
we
have
have
enough
to-
time to do them.
If we did have to wait like 2 years, then I think we should go in depth on that.
I believe it's 35 days for an election and 2 weeks for a special,
Okay.
probably 3 to 4. Just realistically, we're probably talking 5 to 6 weeks once we've decided to do it and have all our data ready. Same as we kind of went into this one. And I think during the FY25 budget process, in my mind, if that's where we are, that's when those impacts will start coming out. If that's where we or we're getting that feedback from voters, they want to readdress it, we can timeline that out through the end, through the May annual or the June or something
Right.
like that again.
And if that was the case, then we would have a clear cut, like this is what's gonna get cut, this is what can stay. Okay.
I think.
Well, I was just gonna ask, I know right now, we're up against the tax rate deadline. So if this were to fail, tax rate has to get set.
We covered that at the last meeting. There's a little
We're-
more space.
That's
There's a
through
little-
January. Yeah.
But is there actually enough space to come back to the table and try and do, to Thomas's point, a whole nother override vote?
It's probably not practical, and you do have a voter fatigue issue with all of this.
Yeah.
So
On a clock, yeah, but I think,
Okay.
I don't think it's realistic for us to get the real detailed information we're gonna want to make those decisions or to have those dialogues at that level in a short timeline. To me,
Yeah, I
that's
don't
gonna
think
be
we
like a
can.
March or something, like, February, March, as we really get in the weeds with the budget for next year, going, okay, this is out, this is in, and here, we're building that list as we go, and then coming to a decision point of, do we want to put this out again? We can put it on an annual. I think Brian and I discussed, maybe we did at the table. There's nothing that says we can't have it on the annual town election or the annual town meeting. So if we're doing all that work in February, March, and we feel strongly at least to put the question out again and put it out in the formats that are already happening. And if we choose not to do it then, we could do it in June. Beyond that, I think it's FY25 we'd be talking about, we'd be back to this timeline as like a drop dead, I think, right? Setting the tax rate again for FY25, so it'd be December next year. So I think anywhere between. I personally don't think, I think even we get some fatigue at looking at these numbers after so many times in a row, and then we're gonna be getting in the budget process doing it again. I just don't see us doing it before then again.
Right, no, that's fine by me. I think we should leave it about what we want, what we currently have, and not talk about what would be cut. Because I think it's clear, if that doesn't go through, everything on that list is not gonna happen anyway.
If people think of other things as we're talking, please speak up, but we'll take a look at the STM draft now and see if there's anything there that anybody notices, kind of the layout, what it is. We've expanded a little since the last meeting as we dove into the details of where all those numbers belong in the budgets and which ones are separate votes or separate appropriations. First article, bills of the prior year again. Same as before. And these are paid from the current year or wastewater appropriation, or water appropriation, sorry. And the
One is,
con-
and the other one is out of
and the
conservation.
conservation, yep. And then we have a second article, which is amending the FY24 elected official compensation. Just changes coming out of the wage table adjustments for non-CBA employees. Three is amending the general operating budget, $687,000. I'm just going back and checking my totals to see. Because we had lots of discussions about the right numbers last time, so.
Yes, we did.
Totals that you all came up with span, I think, 4 articles.
Oh, yeah, because some of that's in there. Okay, I see. Okay. Four is for the wastewater portion, for the wastewater enterprise fund. Five is the continuing annual appropriation, so that was the assessment, defense, assessor's overlay, and the to-be-created grant opportunity match. Six is the capital improvements. So this one, I actually think this isn't how we want to do this. I believe we wanted to fund those out of capital stabilization. I might have made it as a footnote last time, and maybe I didn't. I think we want the entire capital amount to be raised and appropriated into capital stabilization, and then we want to fund capital articles out of it, because then excess would revert back.
Right.
To capital stabilization when it's closed out, right? If they're funded from. So I know I know it's just a shifting money back and forth, but I think we talked about going forward,
Yep.
right, Ben? Is that kind of what the group talked
Because it
about?
captures the total amount that goes in and what's to be expected going forward, annually going in.
So would that, in essence, strike this proposed Article 6 and make Article 7 $955?
No, so Article 6 would stay, but it would be a vote to transfer from capital stabilization $55,000
Okay.
to these accounts. And then Article 7 would be $955 in raise and appropriate into
Gotcha. Okay.
into capital stabilization. So we'd raise the whole thing as one lump sum deposit and then do a withdrawal for the expenditures.
Do you want those presented in reverse order? Or does it
That's
not
what I was
matter?
just gonna ask.
I would think so.
Yeah, I would think that would make sense.
Okay, well, I guess it's up to the capital whether we're recommending to pull that money out of capital stabilization regardless, because the order won't matter if it's regardless. Is the recommendation that, we'll reverse the order, we'll do the 955 deposit first, that's fine. The 55,000 in capital articles that would be funded from, or capital projects that would be funded from capital stabilization. Would the recommendation on the floor be to pass over that if the 900 wasn't approved?
Or are they not
Or
contingent
the
on that?
955, or would we do them either way? And maybe that's a question capital should consider and get back to us for our next meeting.
Yeah, let's think about that for the next meeting.
Okay.
I just have a comment on the wording in the article information. That very last sentence, the proposed amendments are conditional upon approval of levy limit, blah, 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 blah. As a ballot measure at a special town election, is that not what we were doing that night? It just makes it sound like the town election, never mind, I take it all back. Had to read it out loud for it to click, I take it all back.
Okay. I mean, I was thinking you were going towards put the date in there, but we might have to do a second one, so I don't think the date makes sense, but, I mean, we could, if you wanted to, we could change the wording to at the special town election, because there
I
is
took it all
one
back.
upcoming.
I had a moment, I rescinded my comments.
It's all good.
We're all entitled to at least one.
Per night, I hope. So we'll flip the order and just as a tentative outstanding question about whether or not to recommend we still do the capital items if we don't have the capital raise and appropriate. Number 8 is the establishment of the special ed reserve fund. School committee voted to have. 9 is appropriation of opioid settlement stabilization fund. We have additional funds at this point, so we'll put it in there. Yes,
Sorry, didn't catch it at the time, but
go ahead.
on Article 7, is capital improvement committee somebody ready to explain, if people say, what's that $900,000 for? I mean, it may be explained elsewhere, but if somebody asks, it's a big chunk of money, and if we don't plan, so we have a capital planning committee, you know, you just all of a sudden you find out the roof needs replacing or whatever. I'm assuming it's in there for some long-range plan, but somebody may very well ask, what are you gonna do, 900 grand? Just a thought, do what you want with it. Sorry to back up to 7.
No, that's fine. I think it's something that Ben spoke to as the chair last meeting, I think, pretty well about how do we get to that number last 2 meetings.
And we'll talk to it to our meeting this week.
Right.
Make sure we get the right verbiage. Thank you.
And I think we'll have like 4 or 5 year data on where we've been that was informing the decisions or the recommendations on where to go. There was an outstanding question, maybe it wasn't an outstanding question, maybe it was in my head, on whether we reduced that by adjustments from what we had for raise and appropriate FY24 capacity in the annual already. That's how we got to the 955. Did we want to anticipate any free cash, or at this point we would adjust it if we had it in future years?
I thought at last meeting, we talked about keeping it at the
Okay.
1.2.
That's what I thought too.
I don't
because we
recall.
know, free cash is unpredictable at this time.
At this point.
Okay.
And then we can reevaluate as necessary.
Okay. 8, special ed. 9, the opioid settlement money. 10, appropriation general stabilization. So this is the $100,000 that we got for lead. Finally got that for the library, got it done, got the money, it's in the bank. It's part of the final payoffs for the library project back into our general stabilization, so we'll move that. And then I had mentioned, Dan, at a last meeting that sometime probably after the STM, we'll schedule a joint meeting with library trustees and talk through the closeout of the whole library project, all the funding, make sure everything's all as it should be, and we've paid back what we said we would. to get that closed out. Anything else? Anything missed? Any comments, concerns? Any other changes? Vote into stabilization, majority vote out is 9/10,
Yes.
or at least 2/3.
2/3.
2/3.
9/10 is a bill of the prior year.
And it'll be the second day of October. We'll approve it assumingly on the second day of October,
Okay.
given our hands on the,
So no recommendations tonight, we'll hold all of that for the second?
the numbers aren't changing, right? So the question was, are we making recommendations tonight, capital, finance, or not, for the articles? The dollar amounts aren't changing, I think at this point.
Yeah, it's just,
I mean, I'd recommend we approve the warrant tonight. We have to approve the special election warrant tonight anyway, so we'll approve that. That means the number's not gonna change after that, so. I don't know if you guys wanna make those recommendations tonight. Now we can get the draft with them all in place.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
So your recommendation for that we,
I'm sorry, any abstentions, any nays?
I'm
If you
losing
get
it
the full
here.
count, I don't think you need it. I don't do it if I have a unanimous count. Sorry.
It's hard to hear everybody in this format, so.
Yes.
Thank you. It's hard to capture all that. Is capital also making a,
I think they're waiting to,
We kind of.
once you've caught up with the finance one. Done?
I'm ready.
Well,
I recommend,
I
go ahead. You-
I just have a question before we make a motion. Do we want to motion the capital articles if we have one that's in question? If we're gonna keep that one?
Was it, there were two, right?
Is the question to keep it, or is the question just what we would do on the floor if the raise and appropriate's not approved?
Yeah, I thought that was just the question, what we would do on the floor. if one passes.
Could there be a recommendation to pass over it if we don't have the raise and appropriate happen? So, unless I'm wrong,
That's what I thought.
okay?
Okay.
So I recommend that capital,
Recommend supports.
what's my wording here? I'm losing it here, I'm sorry.
No, it's late, we've had a lot of
Yeah.
meetings. I'd like to make a motion to accept the capital articles as
Written.
just the capital articles.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I said aye.
I said, nice.
Oh,
Give you a thumbs up.
I need
Okay.
hearing aids.
So
Can we have bullhorns?
we'll learn to speak up then. So for the next meeting, October 2nd, joint at 7, we will have the final draft with recommendations, adjusted wording, switched order, all of that stuff in place to hopefully to adopt. Make whatever changes and adopt. We'll have to adopt it.
One question though,
Yes.
if we go to a special town meeting and one of these arrows gets shot down, that changes the whole bottom line.
Correct.
So is that gonna be, it's gonna be on the ballot question, so we're gonna have to amend that ballot question?
we
Can't
can't.
amend it. So the plan that we all came up with was October 26th? 3rd, thank you. October 23rd special election has this number in it. We'll approve that in a few minutes. If the number at the STM is changed, is different things are, amended or approved, but there is some override approved, we will hold another special election 35 days later, approximately, with the correct number. And I don't know yet from the town clerk whether we can just put out do we just put out an advisement that it's not, that vote isn't gonna do anything? Because it's already been nullified, even if it passes by the special town meeting? I don't think we can cancel it per se. We haven't figured out what the cancel deadline and timeline is, so we don't know yet if we can officially cancel it, but people show up or not, that vote would be null, basically. But we have enough time to hold another one before we have to set the tax rate, so it'd be roughly the end of November. Right around December 1st, give or take, is what we're targeting. Looked like there were comments? There, you're good.
No, I'm good,
Okay.
just before we adjourn, I was wanting to say something.
Oh, okay.
You tell me when.
Fair enough. Anything else on the STM, the financials, data we want to review? Next meeting for the 10-11 information session, any of it?
Actually, just one thing. Brian, I want to verify, capital planning meeting, Thursday,
Right.
town hall, 6:30?
Yes, I just need an agenda.
That's 6:30.
I have 6:30.
Okay. Dan? I don't think, if there's any other business for the joint meeting.
My comment will only take a second. It's historical in nature. I started doing things for the town, it was 1971 or 72, and done a variety of things since. And I've seen many boards that tried to work together, they're at each other's throats, back and forth. And something in my life, I may not be able to make a couple of these meetings. I'll come whenever I possibly can. But in the meantime, I just wanted to say for whoever's watching, from a historical point of view, the select board, the finance committee, the capital planning, the assessors, all the town boards are working together as close to a Swiss watch movement as I've ever seen. And I'm so pleased that, you know, I could drop dead tomorrow, but I don't plan to, I'm healthy, but. Let's not. I don't get the lottery, go away. But I'm just pleased that after all this time, people have come together and they're working together. They're not sniping at each other. And even if I'm not here, it's certainly in as good a hands as it's ever been, administrator also. So thank you all for doing what you do. It's so much appreciated. It truly is. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other joint business, then I make a motion we adjourn the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee and continue the Select Board meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. See you all in 2 weeks.
And you have just the one
Going
item?
back to, yep. Going back to the special town election warrant draft.
Any other discussion on it?
No, we changed July 1st to July 1, the number
Yeah.
1, right? That was the only amendment?
Correct.
I have no questions.
I have none.
Make a motion that we approve the Town of Erving election ballot for Monday, October 23rd, 2023 as amended.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any other board business before executive?
No.
We will not return to regular session. I move the board goes into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares, which I do. American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93, Water and Wastewater Unit, and immediately following, move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares, which I do. New England Benevolent Police Association, Local 121, Police Unit. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, a roll call vote?
Selectman Moyne,
Aye.
Selectman Bastrach,
Aye.
Chairman Smith.
Aye. Okay,
That's it.
thank you, everyone. Have a good night.